The Russian Foreign Minister asserts the need to continue work with all Syrian parties to resolve the crisis. Syrian military carry out operations in various places across the country. And French fighter jets bomb various sites in Mali, Africa. Good afternoon, this is News in English. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov today stressed the necessity of continuing to work with all the Syrian parties to solve the crisis in the country. In a telephone call with his Indonesian counterpart, Marty Natalegawa, he asserted that there was no alternative to such work with all Syrian parties to achieve an immediate ceasefire and to start a general Syrian dialogue without any preconditions in order to settle the hot topics on the national agenda. The Russian Foreign Ministry said that the contact was in response to an Indonesian invitation yesterday. Mr. Lavrov asserted that the demand of the exit of President Bashar al-Assad as a precondition to launch the political process in Syria was impossible. In a press conference after talks with his Ukrainian counterpart, Mr. Lavrov said Russia's partners were convinced that President Assad should be exempted from this process because such a condition was not contained in the Geneva communique. He called upon the Syrian opposition to follow the course of the Syrian government and present its ideas and initiatives about the dialogue. He added that President Assad's initiatives calling for dialogue are practical. Leaders of the Socialist Unionist Party emphasized that the political initiative put forward by President Assad establishes a safe way out of the crisis for all Syrians. Secretary General of the Socialist Unionist Party, Faiz Ismail, asserted that the party and its supporters are doing their part in communicating with all components of the Syrian political society. The Socialist Unionist confirmed that Syria has become in urgent need to such an initiative to protect the country, considering the initiative as the real guarantor of Syria's Arab regional and international role, by starting a process of dialogue away from being empowered by the situation of violence or legitimizing this situation, or even building on the climate of foreign interference and the equations of brutal force that want to undermine the country. In field developments, a hideout used by terrorists to make explosive devices exploded in Ruknuddin neighborhood in Damascus, killing a terrorist and injuring two others and inflicting material damage on the surroundings. An official source said that the explosion occurred while the terrorists were preparing a number of bombs to use them in their criminal attacks. In Damascus countryside, terrorists fired a missile from dalla towards al-Madamiyeh, hitting a civilian building and causing casualties among women and children. Syrian Arab armed forces inflicted heavy casualties on terrorist groups in dalla when military units at 400 meters to the southwest of al-Khulani Mosque. In Deir ez-Zor, a unit from the Syrian Arab Army eliminated a terrorist group that was committing criminal acts in the areas of Al-Huiqa, Al-Jbeli and Al-Ummal. Among the terrorists killed, there were Abdul Qadir Al-Ibrahim, Al-Ali, Marwan Thalaj and Ahmed Al-Atish. In Deir ez-Zor countryside, a unit of our valiant army eliminated another terrorist group in the areas of Al-Mriye, Qus and Abu Khasab. Among the terrorists killed, there were Ahmed El-Din, Abdul Karibi, Mashhur al-Hindi and Yusha al-Wahib and Khazraj al-Wahib. The recent French assault on Mali raises the question of the double standards used by Western countries, giving themselves the right to combat terrorism abroad and aid terrorists in other places like Syria.
The West, particularly America and France, raised the banner of freedom and democracy in order to achieve their own political and military goals through the false claims to hide the theft of the people's fortunes. They ignore the long and the evil history of decolonization and their record of crimes of spreading chaos and terrorism anywhere they go in order to achieve their own aggressive goals. They also shed tears on the lives of the innocent victims, but they support and they finance the terrorism in the countries that refuse to serve their imperialist projects, such as Syria, for example. They also claim to fight terrorism in oil countries, such as Iraq, Libya, and others, in addition to Mali today. And they ignore the fact that they themselves are creating the terrorism which they claim to fight. In their double standard policy, they use the United Nations as a tool to justify the successive aggressive attacks.
Iraqi Finance Minister Rafa al-Isawi escaped unharmed from a terrorist attack in Baghdad yesterday after he left the building of the ministry. A spokesperson said that a bomb planted on his way exploded near his entourage, but only 2 of his guards were wounded. In Kuwait, thousands of opposition supporters demonstrated in protest in the area of Sabah al-Nasir, calling for giving up the mechanism of voting for one candidate in the parliamentary elections and for political reforms. The security forces dispersed them. They called for cancelling the draft law about redefining the election centres and to bring back the order of 4 votes in the elections. France violates international law and the sovereignty of Mali in a series of attacks and deployment of troops there. The French warplanes waged raids and sent more forces to the capital Bamako, waiting for the arrival of more forces from West Africa. 4 advanced warplanes attacked camps claimed to be for the training of rebels. France sent more than 500 soldiers to be deployed between Bamako and the town of Mopti. By this we end our news for today. Stay with us after the break for a look on the latest economy. And for more details, you can always visit our website in English, www.syriaonline.sy. Thank you for watching.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs and Minister of Domestic Trade and Consumer Protection, Dr. Qadri Jamil, approved importing 100,000 tons of wheat from Ukraine for the benefit of the General Establishment for Cereal Processing and Trade. The approval included allocating 30,300,000 euros to pay for the amount of the wheat, including the control and insurance expenses. According to this approval, the establishment will be able to open the required letter of credit within the specified time for the arrival of the wheat to the Syrian ports. It is to be noted that the imported amount of wheat was approved according to the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the General Establishment for Cereal Processing and Trade and the Green Trading Group, representing the Ukrainian Governmental Commission for Food and Cereals. The marketing indicators of the General Company for Fertilizers showed that last year's sales amount to nearly 50,000 tons of alkalnetso fertilizer. The total value reached more than 560,000 million Syrian pounds with an implementation rate of 46%, while the sales of urea fertilizer topped 130,000 tons, and the value of the actual sales of urea topped 2 billion Syrian pounds with an implementation of 53%. The total amount of sales of phosphate fertilizer was approximately 90,000 tons, while the value of actual sales reached 1,900 million Syrian pounds with an implementation rate of 46%. The unemployment rate of the last month of 2012 in the Eurozone approached 12%, as about 19 million people were unemployed. Spain was the first with a rating of 26.6%, followed by Greece with 26%, compared to 18.9% during the same period last year. While in Italy, last November, the unemployment hit an average rate of 11.1%. It is worth mentioning that the increase in the unemployment rate comes in a time when improvements are taking place in all the EU sectors except retail. Oil traded near a 4-month high in New York. narrowing its discount to the Brent crude to the least since September, after the expansion of a pipeline that may reduce a glut in the US. European stocks rose together with US index futures and Asian shares, excluding Japan, that also climbed. US stock futures were little changed after the Standard & Poor's 500 index climbed for 2 weeks to trade near the highest level in 5 years. Gold rose in London, extending its first weekly advance since November, as speculations that the US stimulus will continue. This weekend, the dollar and increased the demand for an alternative investment. Platinum is also up. The euro hit an 11-month high against the dollar and the European shares rose today. Meanwhile, the Japanese yen continued sinking against other major currencies, touching a fresh 2.5-year low, on expectations that the aggressive monetary easing in Japan will go on. Ladies and gentlemen, this was our economic news for today. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.